this panel is one that's actually really close to my heart. Again, I think everyone has heard me talk about legislative proceedings to the point where they're exhausted, but this session is called Participatory Budget. Obviously, we know we have changes being made to the budget process and legislative proceedings. I've talked in the past, or I kind of started to talk about COVID-19, but if you are someone who has experienced, testifying in Annapolis, even if it was once before, who in the room, who remembers having to drive down to Annapolis and, get here 3 hours before, Nancy's raising her hand, get here 3 hours before just to sign up through the portal, in order to provide testimony, whether it be written or, in person, oral. I think, the legislative proceedings, the legislative process has always been inaccessible. And I'd say that's to the average working person. I have the luxury of having an office right around the corner because of my position. But if you are a person who has a job, right, and who can't take an entire day off just to come and testify, to wait for 3 minutes, if you're a parent, if you're someone who physically is unable to leave your home or easily move around Annapolis, you for many times have not had meaningful access to Annapolis. And, I would say COVID-19, the one positive that came out of there is that it forced the General Assembly's hands, in expanding and using the technology that has long been available to us. So today I'm hoping that our partners who have really been leading efforts around, expanding access to legislative proceedings, both at the state and local level, and, educating the public about the budget process and the changes being made there, that they can kind of help you all learn about the ongoing processes. So I wanted to give our folks a minute just to introduce themselves and to share any information they want about the organizations. Maybe I'll start with Molly, since she's on the screen.
Thanks, Joanne. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. I was really hoping that I'd be able to, but I am still sort of at the tail end of my COVID recovery, and in order to avoid being a public health demon, I am coming to you virtually, which is great. Again, it's amazing that we are in a place where we can operate this way, along with the General Assembly. Mm-hmm. So I'm Molly Amster. I'm the Maryland Policy Director and Baltimore Director for Jews United for Justice. And JUFJ organizes around 6,000 Jews and allies across the state to help win local and state social, racial, and economic justice campaigns. We are celebrating our 25th year in existence. We were founded in DC and worked there for many years. And this is our 9th session in Annapolis. So we're really just very grateful to Common Cause and the whole coalition. It's been a great partnership, especially over the last couple of years.
Thank you, and thank you for being a great partner as well. I'm going to go down the line and start with Callie.
Okay. All right, there we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Callie Schumitz. I'm Vice President of External Relations for the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. So we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit research and advocacy organization, and I would say we broadly focus on issues related to economic justice. We believe that all Marylanders should be able to achieve their full potential in a healthy economy that offers a widely shared and rising standard of living. So we do research and policy analysis on kind of a broad range of issues, but in particular, we view state fiscal policy, so the budget and the tax system, as a really essential tool for ensuring that all families and communities have what they need to thrive. This is our 10th anniversary year, and we are also MDOG members. And then I say personally, I am also a former journalist, so transparency, accessibility, accountability, they're all deeply held values for me personally as well as for my organization.
Thank you. Nikki?
Hi, I'm Nikki Tyree. I'm the Executive Director for the League of Women Voters of Maryland. The League is an organization that's over 100 years old, and we believe, very similar to the other organizations up here, that all people in Maryland deserve to not only have an informed government body, but that the people and the voters deserve to be as informed as possible, and that they should have accessibility to the polls and that they should have as much information as possible in order to vote, to be informed. So we're MDOG members as well, and we, along with Common Cause, led the effort to create the hybrid legislator that you have this session.
Thank you. And Sammy, or Samuela.
Good afternoon. My name is Samuela Ansa. I am the voting rights advocate at Disability Rights Maryland. Disability Rights Maryland is the state's federally mandated protection and advocacy agency for people with disabilities. We provide free legal assistance to all Marylanders with disabilities of any age, from education, transportation, housing, and I do our voting work. During the 2022 election, our status as a protection and advocacy agency allows us to enter institutions where people with disabilities reside. So we're able to do a little bit of voter outreach at 2 state hospitals, and with the help of the best election protection volunteers in the state, we were able to survey drop boxes for accessibility throughout the state. Personally, I joined DRM a little over a year ago now, and this is my 3rd legislative session, so I'm even honored that I was asked to be a part of this panel. So I'm really excited to learn from all these seasoned advocates and offer the little insight I have as a newcomer, so thank you.
Thank you. And obviously 3 years is still a significant amount of time. I know that the room is big, so I want to make sure that everyone is able to hear us. So if it helps, feel free to grab the mic off of the, the stand in order to bring it closer to you all too, so that folks can hear. So this question is kind of going to be open-ended, and I know hopefully Molly is still on the screen and able to hear us. I've talked a bit already about some of the barriers that have long existed in terms of access to Annapolis. I wanted to give our partners an opportunity to kind of share some of those boundaries, right, for the public and even for advocates that many times have had trouble just making it in time to Annapolis to sign up to testify in the morning. So I will open it up to whoever wants to kick us off, just thinking about those boundaries and how inaccessible Annapolis was prior to COVID.
So I think that, the very first thing that comes to mind for me would just be the publicity behind a lot of the legislation's movement. This could be publishing when voting sessions are going to happen. I think that's something that they've rectified this session, but that was a big hurdle for a lot of our advocates to get over, as well as just kind of understanding how to meet with their legislators. I think that when it comes to actually engaging in the process, it's not very clear to a lot of, everyday people who are not, whose job this isn't it, that they can just sort of call or email. It seems when you get elected to office, you become bigger than life. And I think that that's always the number one hurdle when I start meeting with our members.
Mm-hmm. If anyone else wants to jump in,
I would just definitely echo that. I think we've touched on a lot of the points that made things inaccessible, but the thing that always stuck with me that to not only speak in front of a committee on a bill, but if you just wanted to have written testimony on the record prior to the pandemic, you had to physically drive to Annapolis just to drop off your written testimony. Sure, anyone could call or email their local legislator, which is fairly accessible, but they're not necessarily on the right committee that's making the decision on the issue that you really care about. So that was a huge barrier before, which thankfully they were forced to set up a system to submit testimony electronically, and so that was something that was really important. And I think just to echo what Nikki was saying, I think there's a lot of information that is available publicly on the state's website, but it's not necessarily easy to find. It takes a lot of time, and we've all been doing this for years, so I now know the lingo and things like that, but there are still things that surprise me, or still things that I have trouble finding. So I'm trying to imagine like an average citizen who's just interested in a particular bill or a particular issue, trying to find out what's going on. It's not really that accessible.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anyone else Molly had an example. I can give some. I have a lot. I could go on for days. But, I know one, when I first started at Common Cause, right, and I had not been, I've never been to Annapolis before. And I remember my first day coming here during legislative session. I had not had a guaranteed parking spot yet. And it took me forever, y'all, forever to find a spot to park. And this is someone who has an office right there. So even for the person who is able to make it out to Annapolis, having to, depending on the day, go through obstacles to find a parking spot, to pay for the parking for the day, and so forth. We know that a lot of these things are intentional, right? It is Annapolis. Many don't want it to be accessible, but just that is a boundary for the person who is trying to come. And one other example, even though this is a change that was going to be slowly made, obviously the late Speaker Bush had made a commitment to begin streaming floor proceedings. Now, if you remember, 2020, the year that COVID hit, is actually the first time we were able to start watching people on the floor in the House. And they were still in a pilot testing of it. Before that, we were listening to voices, trying to figure out who it was and so forth. And again, this is another example where the COVID, even though we were already moving in that direction, I believe the Senate had indicated that the following session they'd be streaming floor proceedings as well. We moved away from this idea of a pilot, and they had no choice but to begin streaming right away. And I think for many advocates and for the public, right, being able to go and pull up a recording of someone on the floor, and what the things that are shocking that they are saying on the floor around a bill is impactful, and something that I've seen many people even use during election cycles. So I think the accountability there, right, a legislator having to stand up and publicly say something knowing that their constituents is going to watch them, is impactful. Before I keep rambling, Molly or anyone else, because I can keep going. But any other obstacles for individuals or barriers? And I know a lot of these will come up, but I'm going to pass this on to Molly. While the pandemic obviously has impacted Marylanders and others throughout the country in ways that, I'm sure will continue to feel for years. It forced the General Assembly to adopt to technology that has been available to us. So what are some of the positive changes that have been made over the last 2 years that we hope will remain permanent?
Yeah, so I think that we've covered a lot already, but a couple that, as you mentioned, first is the streaming floor sessions and being able to actually, it's hard to remember even back to listening, like who was that talking? Yeah. But being able to actually see in the House and the Senate, the legislators doing the people's work, it was a big change that was quite positive. The other things that came to mind for me were, as Callie mentioned, the online system for submitting testimony. The fact that people can do that online is really a big new thing, and also being able to kind of, for the legislators and for us, being able to see who has submitted testimony, being able to on the screen see like favorable, unfavorable. Obviously, we're not seeing it quite in the same real time that the legislators are, but those two pieces also stand out. And then streaming the hearings, with video, and then most importantly, streaming voting sessions, which even we're talking before the pandemic. Especially before some of the new chairs took their places this past term, people were very much discouraged from even being in voting sessions a lot of the time, and it was sort of an unsaid rule that if you went into a particular hearing room, your bill was dead. If you went in when they were voting, excuse me, I have to.
Thank you. Aw.
So the fact that we can sit at home and watch a voting session is a pretty significant step forward for transparency.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I don't know. Okay. And I will direct this next question to Nikki. I know that the League of Women Voters of Maryland, similar to other organizations, a lot of your advocacy efforts involve your members, right? A lot of times we could be in a committee room and it's 2 or 3 different league members, that are testifying on various bills. So, Molly has outlined some of the positive changes that have been made over the last few years. I guess, how have these helped expand opportunities for your members to engage in the process?
Yeah, so I think that the league's members are actually a pretty good example of Maryland as a whole. We kind of run the gambit. A lot of our members do tend to be older, but with that comes a host of different abilities, right? So not all of them can drive to Annapolis, or a lot of them live on a fixed income, so they can't pay the $15 to park in Annapolis, or if they're here all day for an Enviro bill. How many of us have sat or watched at this point an Enviro bill go for 12 hours in committee? They can't pay to park their cars for that long, or to walk if they have to park very far. A lot of them also struggle with different illnesses, or having to watch grandchildren, or they just don't want to make the hour-plus drive into Annapolis. We have members who live over on the Eastern Shore who don't want to drive across the bridge. And it's not because they don't want to engage in democracy. Of course they do. But this is a huge hurdle for them. This is an all-day experience for them. And we all have lives, right? So I think that that's something that being able to tune in virtually helps them a lot. We definitely noticed that with the expansion of the technology, our advocacy has really grown. More people want to get involved. More people want to be able to testify. They want to be able to take meetings with legislators. So we at the League have seen kind of a robust growth and people coming to learn about how do you reach out to the staff to set up meetings, how do you tune into committee meetings, that kind of thing, which has been amazing, because we have so many different interests that get to be impacted in that way. And then we have the other side of it, which is me. I have a 2-year-old, and I did a lot of testimony last year. I wrote a lot of testimony. I did a lot of meetings with legislators last year with her in the room or on my lap. Nancy's here, she's our president, and I think that she saw my daughter just as much as I did last year. But sometimes it is unavoidable. So next week, I think I'll be in the house in person, and she'll have to come with me because, we have to do these things. So if you want a show, come on by the house at some point during a committee meeting. She'll be there. But yeah, we all have lives, again, like I said, and virtual and accessibility has really helped a lot of people be able to get engaged in that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And I want to lift up the parent piece. We heard from so many parents who, again, just sometimes aren't able to come or aren't able to bring their kids for a day, even though some people can do that, and being able to, again, participate, with their kid in their lap on Zoom and so forth, and even legislators, right, who had children too, even though they have to be on the floor, being able to engage in legislative committee proceedings and so forth with their child as well. I think the other important piece there too is, we saw a lot of new faces. I know in my committees, a lot of times I would see the same people all the time. I saw a lot of, I guess we'd say, regular people, like average concerned folks who were able to keep up with things and make their voices heard for the first time. I saw more black and brown people than I've seen before. And, unfortunately, when we saw last session, the Senate, shifted back to in-person, even though they've made changes since then, there's no data, and hopefully we'll be able to maybe in some way compile that. But we did see a quick shift already in the Senate, seeing very few, folks from historically disenfranchised communities making their voices heard in the process. But even with that, I would say that there are people that still, unfortunately, get left behind. So this is for Sammy. I know that a lot of times when we're talking about public engagement, right, we forget that there are members of the public who are confined to their homes, who are immunocompromised, who can't be here today, for example, have limited mobility. And, in what ways do you think, their ability to participate during the last 2 or 3 years was positively impacted? Do you think more of them were able to make their voices heard?
I definitely agree. There's a lot of barriers that keep people at home still, especially the shortage of caregivers, I want to say, and direct support professionals, and the wages in that industry as well is kind of having an impact on how people can participate or stay at home and have the assistance that they need with their daily activities. I think COVID definitely helped us realize that we can work from home, we can school from home, and you can participate in the legislative session from home, and kind of really evened out the playing field a little bit for us, especially on the advocacy side. I think for every advocate that does show up in Annapolis, they're bringing the community or the issue that they're advocating for into the room with them. So just because you see one face, there's so many other people behind that one person. And there's definitely strength in numbers. I think advocacy work is definitely community work. And so for one person that you see, there's so many people at home that can do email blasts, do social media toolkits, tweet their legislators, Facebook and everything like that, which helps push issues, let legislators know that we're paying attention, and we have like a home team, a home base for this issue. I think for legislators, it keeps eyes on them and keeps them on their toes, which is a good thing, holding them accountable, like you said, and the transparency that comes with that. So I don't think being confined to home or having to stay at home precludes anybody from engaging in the process, which is obviously a beneficial thing for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And I actually, and Molly and Nikki might actually remember this too. If you go on Twitter and you follow our old hashtag from last year, right, Keep MD Senate Open, the stories that were shared by members of the public was just shocking to me. Like, we know that Annapolis wasn't that accessible, but hearing someone, you know, who's coming to Annapolis, I guess using the MTA accessible van, right, and them pretty much testifying and having to spend hours being stuck in Annapolis until about 8 or 9 p.m. until they could finally get home, you know, because the MTA van didn't come back, or it came back in time and couldn't find her, and so forth. So again, even for the person that comes, it can be a day-long, unfortunate process. But I kind of wanted to shift us a bit, right, to our advocacy. So, you know, last year, over just about 200 organizations, you know, you all included, joined us in calling on leadership to make these changes permanent. You know, and while leadership thankfully has to some extent indicated that that is their goal. I think we see that this session, and hopefully over the next few weeks, we'll see how these protocols roll out. But why do you think so many groups and so many individuals wanted to maintain these changes? And, you know, kind of on the opposite side of that, I was shocked. I ran into, I'd say, opposition to these changes too, right? So I guess without naming names or any individual organizations, just first, you know, why do you think so many groups were supportive? And why do you think, again, there are these entities over here that don't want to expand access to Annapolis? And I'll pass that to anyone.
Yeah, so I think that part of it definitely has to do with when last session, when the Senate closed back up to the hybrid or the virtual, we saw an immediate shift of Black and brown citizens coming in, of really just like heart-wrenching anecdotal testimony, and it went right back to, you know, to put it very plainly, we saw a lot of white men who had jobs that allowed them to take the time off to come in, and that is a very select elitist group of people. But unfortunately, that is also the people who have been able to and are able to get things done when it comes to our legislators. And I think it also has to do with the fact that sometimes you want to keep things the same to keep things the same, and you're comfortable with it. So we did have to go up against that a little bit. We were asking to change what people were comfortable with, and I don't think that's easy. We were also up against groups that had more money and more resources than probably us combined. So I think that was just one of the biggest obstacles. And then a lot of it has to do with what Joanne has already said, which is that asking for virtual, asking for this hybrid really does allow a spotlight to be shown on what is happening. Anybody can now go to MGA, click on a link, and all of a sudden you can see everything that people are saying. If, a committee turns a camera to a wall while they're supposed to be deliberating on camera, you can watch that. And
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it does.
I didn't say it.
Yeah.
But so that's open now. And people can watch it, and people will tweet about it or put it on social media, and you can't escape that. And then when it comes time to run, you have to explain it.
Mm-hmm. And I want to give an opportunity in case anyone else wants to weigh in.
I can just share another quick example for kind of why we supported keeping the hybrid option. I think one of the constituent groups that we work with is small businesses. We work on a lot of economic issues, and it's really hard for small business owners to come to Annapolis, and that creates this space for paid contract lobbyists representing organizations to claim that they are representing small business voices when they may or may not be. I don't want to speak for who they're actually talking to, but with the hybrid testimony, it was much easier for us to get small business owners to come and testify and share their experiences and talk about the legislation that would directly affect their business and get those different perspectives in the room. And yeah, as far as the pushback, I think both from some professional advocates and from legislators, hearings can already be very long, and the idea of opening up more access means to them, they're like, wait, that means more people can testify. That means this hearing that's already taking, 12 hours, now there might be even more people coming to speak. And I think, that merits maybe looking at the whole system and, why are we trying to do all these things in 90 days and, creating these artificial time pressures. But I think that was one of the big pieces of pushback that we heard.
Yeah, I think Callie really got to the heart of it too. Again, we know that accommodations are going to have to be made. We've only got 90 days, but the more access means more accountability, right? More eyes on the people that you've sent to Annapolis to do jobs for you. But on top of that, when we talk about special interests, we're talking about, black hat lobbyists too that are well funded, that are working against your interest, and who, when no one is watching them, is able to pass things, right? So if more of us are making our voices heard and speaking out against those things, it makes their job more difficult. So there are people who unfortunately want to maintain the status quo, but I think there are I shouldn't say young only, but there are new leaders in Annapolis, right? There are new folks taking over these organizations who really are pushing for change and for a more equitable, inclusive process. I know that we're running low on time, but I wanted to shift us to another major and sometimes complex process in the legislative, in the 90-day session, which is the budget. In 2020, voters approved a constitutional amendment, and meaning that members of the General Assembly now have a more meaningful say in the state's budget. So I wanted to see if Callie can quickly explain what those changes are and what we can expect to be different this session.
Sure. Prior to this constitutional amendment, which was approved by voters in 2020, but just taking effect with this upcoming budget year, so during this session, Maryland had the most governor-dominated budget process in the country. Our governor introduced the budget, and the legislature could cut line items, but they couldn't increase anything. So that meant they couldn't move money around to reflect their constituents' priorities, and they couldn't increase funding. They had some complicated workarounds that I won't get into today because of time. So they did have some tools that they've developed and tricks to have their say in the budget. At the end of the day, it's really, was the governor and his administration making the decisions about how we're using the billions and billions of dollars of Maryland's taxpayer money. The change that happened with the constitutional amendment allows the legislature to increase line items, move things around. They still have to balance the budget, and they still have to stay within the general parameters of the size of the governor's budget, but they have much more ability to move things around. The governor does now gain a line item veto, but the legislature can override the governor's veto. So that was essentially what the constitutional amendment does, and we think it's really important not just to give the legislature more power and create a better working dynamic and partnership between the governor and the legislature, but your local delegate and senator are much more accessible to you than the governor or than to a state agency, which is really the only way in the past to weigh in and influence the budget, because the legislature couldn't do that much, and sometimes they found that a convenient excuse, to be honest. So I think looking ahead to this session, I think we'll see some change, but I think given the political changes now, the legislature and the governor are the same party, they have more incentive to work together because of that. And also I think, as I was just saying, some legislators kind of liked being able to say, well, we can't do anything about this. This is the governor, when their constituents are coming to them about a budget issue. So I think for some of the same dynamics with other transparency measures, that they're a little hesitant to overstep and hesitant about how much public input in the budget they really want, because budget hearings traditionally have very few people testifying, and there's very little public input. But we're trying to, we've been having lots of conversations and doing trainings for lots of different groups and trying to get the public to understand what's going on with the budget, or to understand the budget process and the ways that they can influence it. So we're hopeful that over the next couple of years that we'll see some real meaningful changes in community's ability to really have a say in how our shared resources are used.
And I know that there are questions, especially around the budget. So I'm gonna kind of cut down some of the questions that we have for time. But I did just very quickly, I guess, are there any, it sounds like the budget process, there's an opportunity for it to be a lot more transparent, inclusive. So in addition to these ongoing efforts to make the process remain hybrid, so ability to participate from home and in person, is there anything else that lawmakers should be doing so that you all, when you meet with your legislators, can lift up these specific actions?
Yeah, everyone got a handout that has our
Yes.
Maryland Center on Economic Policy's recommendations in more detail, but a couple of things that I'll lift up quickly. Number one, to kind of address that time crunch that happens during session, making sure that there are opportunities, and also because the budget is largely developed in the fall and not during session. We really want to make sure that people have opportunities in their community to comment on what spending priorities are important to them. So we would really love to see either within a district or within a county or city, the local delegations having hearings and input sessions in the fall for people to learn about the budget and and voice what their priorities are. The other pieces, the other big piece that we're concerned about is making budget information more accessible and easier to understand. So that's being able to find the information on a website, but also in the budget documents providing more context. Like, a lot of it is just presented with a line item that you may or may not know what it is and a dollar amount. Well, that dollar amount means nothing if you don't know if it has gone up, has it gone down, is this a new priority? So providing more of that context within the budget documents so people can read them and see what decisions are being made. And then along with providing that context, we'd really like to see racial equity impact analysis be part of the budget documents. The Department of Legislative Services does analysis of each section of the budget that they present at the budget hearings. We'd love to see racial equity impact analysis included in that. So those are kind of some of our main recommendations.
Those are all really important. I want to lift up the understanding the budget process. It really is not that simple to navigate and so forth. And I think the racial impact statement would be significant, right? A lot of times decisions are being made, even on legislation, without understanding the true impact that it has on certain on all communities, right? But specific communities. So I think we will be sending emails to everyone who registered. We'll include a link to your website so that folks can sign up to join these ongoing budget efforts. I'm kind of going to wrap us up and move us to one last question, and I'm going to open it to all of the panelists. Obviously, both leadership in the House and Senate have announced, right, that this session will be hybrid. There are there are protocols on their website, right? So you can sign up to testify using the online portal. There's windows for that. We hopefully, they've committed to making sure that we can watch voting sessions, so all proceedings, and slowly committees are beginning to release their protocols. So again, this is a process that we are all monitoring. But even with this progress, right, we know that there's still further change that's needed to make this a truly inclusive process. I wanted to see if folks had any examples of further changes that maybe are needed. So if the General Assembly says hybrid is going to remain permanent, we know that it still does not actually work for everyone the way that it's set up. So if anyone wants to lift up any specific things that are still needed that leadership might want to consider.
So I can start with, I know, I sort of made a list of all the things that are both wonderful and also challenging about the way that things are. So I'm going to try to summarize some of that. I think one piece, which I think you alluded to, Joanne, is that the unfortunate fact is that while the online submission and the online participation is a really positive step, having the online submission also means that people without computer access will have difficulty submitting written testimony. They can certainly come to Annapolis and deliver testimony that way, but if they are wanting to submit written testimony, they need access to a computer and reliable internet, which we know are things people don't all have. One thing that I'll just say, sort of broad strokes without going through all of the differences between the House and Senate, is that it really is a challenging thing. We talked at the beginning about the general public being able to kind of wrap their heads around how to follow what's happening is made much more difficult when there are such inconsistent guidelines and protocols. Even just, between the House and Senate, but then also between committees. And we get that chairs should have, discretion and be able to, decide how they're going to run things. But when one chamber, you have to sign up 24 hours in advance, and the other one, you have to sign up 48 hours in advance. And one chamber, you'll get notified the day of if you're giving testimony online or not. And and you'll get the link that way, but the other chamber is going to let you know by noon the day before. And there's just all these different things to try to understand, and it makes it much more difficult for people to participate. I'll stop there, and if other people want to jump in, I'll see if what else I left out in my notes here.
I want to open it up. Make sure y'all grab them. Yeah.
I think people said a lot of the accessibility issues that are presented here. I was talking to Joanne when I came in this morning about how there's a really small button for accessibility on the MGA website, all the way at the bottom, and there you can find more information about how to get interpreters if you need them, just different small little features of accessibility, but the option is so small to see it that it makes it really hard for people who might need those resources to find. And just getting to Annapolis, getting here is really a problem. Paratransit services have been lacking a bit since the pandemic has happened, so it makes travel for people with disabilities difficult, and just walking around Annapolis, paying $15 for parking, getting time off, having your caregiver come with you if you need it, all present challenges. I hope this isn't too radical to say, but I also think 90 days for a legislative session is a bit too short. And I think people who do this for a living and full-time are already fatigued with how quick everything goes by. I feel like you blink and something else has happened to your bill that you have no idea what happened. So I think 90 days is a little inaccessible in itself. And I also think budget hearings are in person only this session, which I think is a little bit inaccessible. I'm not sure. I could be wrong, but I feel like I read that yesterday.
You could be right also. Again, this is where, to Molly's point, the rules are changing kind of all around, and we're still waiting on some committees to release their protocols. So that could very well be the case. But I wanted to lift up an important thing that you said there, because I didn't know that before I talked to Sammy outside. That at the General Assembly's website, at the bottom, there's something that you can go to for translation services. Now, I'm not sure about my partner's first time we've heard this, period. I'm positive that many others don't know it, and I'm positive it's not being utilized much. I'll give you an example. Redistricting hearing, I think it was last session, we had someone testifying. He's using sign language, and at some point someone finally realized that he was using sign language, but there was no way for him to indicate ahead of time that, one, he needed a translator, and two, that someone realized that he is signing on screen, right? So again, I don't know if that form was at the bottom of the page before, but I think lifting up the translation services being a great need. For those whose first language is not English, our partners at CASA is a great example. They're also another organization that's always bringing members to testify, and CASA staff have to be the ones to sit in the hearings and translate for them, right? So hopefully next session, I'm claiming it, right? We've moved towards using technology or translation services that can be utilized so that more members of the public could come in and testify in the language most comfortable to them. But if there's no other,
I want to add one more, which is just about like the window for submission is only during business hours, and it's not even all day. It's 8 to 3, and then I was reading. I had thought that was for both House and Senate, and I realized when I was looking through things that some of the House protocols documents say 8 to 3, and some say 10 to 3. So I'm gonna reach out to Jeremy and let him know that so that can be corrected. But if I'm working at a job where I am, don't have access to a computer, I am unable to submit that testimony and to sign up to provide testimony.
Yep. Thank you. And this is a reminder for anyone, if you're testifying on a bill on Tuesday, your testimony and sign up is due today, 3 p.m. So I wanted to open it up for Q&A, and Casey is going to come around. She's our outreach and engagement manager. She will have a mic. Oh, he has a mic for you actually in the back. Thank you. For those who have questions, I wanted to make sure we started here first because I know that there was a question. If you still have it, yes. So Casey will come over to you right here, on to the right or to your left. Sorry, she had her hand up before.
Thank you, and I don't know if anybody knows this offhand, but I heard you say that the governor has line item veto, but the legislature can override.
Yes.
What is the percentage?
It's 3/5 of the legislature.
Okay. Right, that was
Thank you. And hopefully this is where Isabel and others, if you're watching Facebook, letting us know if there's any questions that are coming up in the feed. Thank you.
Hello, I was just wondering what accessibility issues incarcerated people might be having in terms of advocating, and whether or not you still have to submit paper copies to different committees, which was also a major concern for a lot of us.
Yeah. So maybe I will.
Oh, I'm sorry. And finally, if you have to have the your own separate USB, whatever that thing was that they had for a little while.
that change that happened right before. So I want to make sure everyone heard, whether or not we still need to bring in physical paper copies to committees, whether or not the USB process that we had started, I think in 2020, whether or not that's still needed, and accessibility for, I was going to say eligible incarcerated voters, because we work on the voting in jail, but incarcerated Marylanders, right? People who want to make their voices heard in the legislative process at the state level or the local level. So maybe I'll open it up to our panelists. I mean, I can start us off if or I see Molly.
I mean, so the USB thing is a thing of the past. You can only submit testimony by creating a MyMGA account on the General Assembly website. Mm-hmm. There's a button in the top right corner of the website where you can create that, and there are tutorials on how to do it. So everything has to be submitted electronically. And, again, as I mentioned, if you want to submit a paper copy, you cannot. So that is a limitation. And I can't, unfortunately, speak to what an incarcerated person's experience would be. I don't know if anyone else can.
I mean, I can kind of jump in there. I'll be honest and transparent. I didn't consider that, right? And this is where I think hopefully, one, it's something we can prioritize now, and I think this is where we bring in partner organizations like Out for Justice, Life After Release, and others, especially since we know that, around some of the outreach that was happening in partnership with those groups, ACLU and so forth, a lot of the state prisons are slowly moving towards tablets. We were not able to utilize the tablets or see them, so we don't know if the tablets have streaming capability, let's say. And so for them, positive that there's limitations there. I think logistically, just trying. Yeah, I mean, actually, I take that back, right? I know that there are times, though, where our partners have managed to get folks inside to submit written testimony. Unfortunately, it had to go to the organization. It takes a lot of coordination, and they're submitting it on their behalf. But right now, there is no meaningful way for them to engage at the state or local level. And I think it's a gap in at least our advocacy. We haven't thought about it. So I think, thank you for lifting that up. And I would say, to Sammy's point, also thinking about other folks that are in the custody of facilities where, they don't have access, the ability to do things on their own. But I don't think it's something that we at least have thought about. And I'm not sure if others have as well, not in a meaningful way. Yeah.
Thank you. Two related questions. One, how does this transparency and inclusion and public input apply to each of your organizations? For instance, this is a great list. I like it, but I have a lot of comments on it, and I have a lot of things that I wish were on this list, detailed from my experience working in government and so forth. How do I reach out to get input to you? I've tried many different ways, and I know you got to raise money, but that's always what I get. I don't get, an open ear or let's talk. So how does the public help inform you about what is really concerning us about gaining access to government?
Maybe we'll do a round robin. It's kind of everyone, right? So what are the benefits in some of these changes or some of the advocacy that we're proposing? I don't know if anyone wants to start.
Well, I can say that for me and the league, it seems like there's no shortage of people who have my email or Nancy's email or our office email, and it's always open, and people email us all the time with concerns about what we're working on or not working on. And if you need my email, I have my business card, I'll give it to you. So the league is very open to hearing from anybody and everybody 24/7.
I just say you're holding up our document. So we, we're not as directly connected to communities. Like we don't do direct service work. We don't have members. So it's a little bit different. We do try and talk to a lot of our different partner organizations. We have started doing things like we had listening sessions in the fall of 2021 to get input on our policy priorities for this legislative session. But yeah, as far as, and our contact information is all on our website, and we're always happy to have one-off conversations. You wouldn't be the first person to email us a list of things that you think we missed out on or we should be considering. We're definitely happy to listen and find time to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anyone else wanted to weigh in before
I would say DRM is a law clinic first, so we have clients. So we'll take like individual things. I think we also recognize more systemic issues and take that to court, lawsuits and things like that. Or if we can, then advocate in the General Assembly. But our funds are a little weird, so our advocacy on the policy side is a little bit more regulated for us. We also have an advocacy service plan that we do every year, so people in the community can tell us what's really important to them, and we'll prioritize our services based on what people in the community are experiencing at the moment. And we have an intake team that's really, really great about receiving calls and hearing out people's issues. And we have different teams that do different things, like housing, I do our voting work, IEPs, education, things like that. So all of our contact information is online, and I don't think everyone's individual email is available online, but if you contact one person, they'll probably get you in touch with who you need to speak to.
Okay. And what I will say, if it's helpful, I know we've got more questions. When we send a thank you email to those who registered, we will provide contact information if panelists agree to their email addresses. I would also say sometimes if you can't get a specific organization, you try others. I think the one thing that's great about Maryland is that we really truly do work in coalition. So even if you can't get a hold of Callie and you told me, I will see Callie and I'll mention it to her. I think maybe something else that's worth considering, we have this list of organizations that took action with us, right? So a lot of this hybrid advocacy that we're doing really was informed by members of the public and groups. So if capacity allows, because it is a unique session, maybe what we try and do is a virtual listening session, right? Maybe there are gaps in our advocacy. There are other issues that we're unaware of. We want to know those things, right? So fundraising emails aside, which sometimes we don't control, those are comms teams, right? Maybe we can see if there's some way, as a follow-up to this, just a virtual online, a space where you can come and share issues and concerns and suggestions. And I don't know how much time we have left, but I know there was a question here.
Time for one or two more.
Okay. Oh, she has a question too.
My understanding of the government is broader than the legislative branch, which you are focusing when it comes to transparency.
Not all.
Everybody's talking about the legislative
we're
branch.
focused on
Currently,
all
it's focused on that one.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to see transparency in every branch of government, as well as those implementing institutions like Department of Labor, Public Works, state transportation agencies. How is your organizations working with other institutions beside the legislative branch to make them transparent in providing the services they are supposed to provide and their accessibility to the public? For me, it took me a while to understand the legislative branch. I got involved with the ACLU, and then I learned how to get information from their website. I know how to reach my elected officials when I have issues. But when it comes to implementation agencies, there are still bigger issues of transparency. Yeah. What are you doing when they are implementing those legislations? How transparent are they with the public, with those who have issues with them, and in general? Yeah. What are you doing? What is your organization doing to make them public?
Maybe I can kick us off. Just the larger coalition as a whole, MDOG, so Marylanders for Open Government, we are focused on all aspects of government, so that would include the executive and judicial branch as well. So I think, the one example is where we have Dr. Carmen, who's joining us and talking about the efforts to create greater transparency and accountability in the courts. I know that our organizations have also supported over the last, I want to say 3 years. Every year there's like a few bills creating greater access to executive agencies in the executive branch. So I think it was just last year we passed a robust bill that requires streaming advance notice, obviously, and I think that was no, actually it wasn't required, right? So they're covered under the Open Meetings Act, so they're required to put out things like the agenda ahead of time, materials ahead of time. Many of these agencies are now legally required to stream their meetings. There will be closed sessions at times, but even there, they're required by law to provide the public with advance notice of those things happening. And streaming and archiving might seem small, but a lot of times these agencies that we're thinking about, they're meeting during the day at the most awkward times, sometimes at like 7 a.m. I saw one. So being able to, even if you're at work, you've missed the meeting, being able to go back to the archive stream, to look through the materials, to look at the meeting, I think that's one example of actions that have been taken that are significant. But I think to your point, there's not enough public education happening around it, right? So we passed it, and I'm sure most people don't know that those streams are now available. But that's just one example. I know that there's more work that's needed, and I don't know if there are other examples. I think language access applies to that too, because we know that it's not that accessible, and so forth.
I just add quickly to that data and reporting. So some of that is mandated. We work with the legislature to mandate those things from state agencies in terms of what data they're collecting, what they're reporting on, what those reports look like. Sometimes we're doing that on our own in getting data that's not super publicly available, but is public data, and doing our own analysis and publishing it. One example of that is the Kids Count, which is Annie Casey Foundation project. We're the Kids Count partner for Maryland. We collect a lot of this different data from the state agencies and work together and make it public about that helps people understand how kids and families are doing in Maryland. So that's something that's really important to us, and we're continuing to advocate in different ways, and including with the new incoming administration and the transition process around ensuring that state agencies are collecting and reporting data.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that's a role that elected officials can play. I think Senator Kagan did a really good job last year about making sure the state board would release their materials ahead of time of their meetings. And she would send them an email like, this is mandated by law that you guys have to release these materials ahead of time. So I think that's a really good way to get in contact with your elected official or whoever can, alert those organizations about their responsibilities to us. And there was another thought I had, and it's totally gone.
But I know that if hopefully that gives you some sense, right? So that is not to say we know that there's more work to be done, right? And I think, all of our organizations engage with these branches of government in different ways. So this is where I think we collectively need to do a better job of seeking out input from members of the public, those who are engaging with these agencies, with sometimes even quasi-government entities, right? Which a lot of times aren't actually covered under our PIA and open meetings laws, right? And so forth. So flagging those issues as they come up and recommendations that you might have. And I think considering talking to champions for transparency here in the legislature who can have an impact on those branches of government. So I think Senator Kagan, Delegate Corman are great examples of people who every single year it seems like they come back and they found some other place, that is not transparent and function in an open and accessible way. I know that we are I don't know what time it is.
So we're gonna just move to a quick break, and
I know that she just had a quick question. You're good? You could give her the mic because folks can hear.
As a grassroots activist, the ACLU and the League of Women Voters have formed coalitions and supported some of our efforts. But, coming to this, what's just dawned on me is that this really should be almost like an organization that entity within itself. There are so many. It's not just the different agencies in the county, in the state government, it's the counties.
Yeah.
And I've come across there's the interaction between, like a lot of us are looking at different issues in the counties that really require more transparency and advocacy.
Yeah.
So maybe you all ought to think about somebody starting
Yes.
this as a.
No, thank you for the feedback. I mean, I know we ain't got the capacity, but I mean, I do think it's a great idea, right? I do think there's a need for an institution that is focused solely on these issues at all levels of government. I think it's something the coalition might have to discuss. And I think this is where my call to action comes in, right? For whatever reason, our scanning code is not working at the moment, but we are looking to grow and expand the coalition. We want it to include grassroots groups as well, and we want all of these efforts to trickle down to the local level. So even when we're talking about hybrid proceedings, I'll point to Baltimore City as an example where the government has proactively on their own decided to make access to their council proceedings and their board of estimates hybrid, right? So I think you're right. All of this needs to be larger, and I think hopefully after today, we are able to kind of come back together and figure out next steps. But I am going to pass it to our awesome outreach and engagement manager to make some announcements. But I first wanted to make sure I thanked our great panelists who were able to join us. If y'all want to give them a round of applause, especially Molly, who still joined us virtually. And I wanted to give them a second if there are any final, things that you want to share, or if there's relevant, we are in the middle of session, so is there anything that you want to lift up very quickly that members of the public need to know?
I just want to reiterate what was said, that if people are encountering challenges around accessing participation in the legislative process, please do let us know, because we've been meeting with the leadership of each chamber, and we'll continue to do so as problems arise. So let us know.
Thank you. And others?
For anyone who's interested in learning more about the state budget process and this year's proposed budget, we have a virtual training on February 3rd.
I didn't even know.
We just announced it today. So. And if you, on the table out there, there's a QR code to sign up for our email list to make sure you get information, or you can find it on our website.
Good.
I'll just say that, for the league, we want to help everybody get involved in the democratic process. It's not just about accessibility for us, although that's what our main focus today was. So if you ever have any questions or just, want to talk, please reach out to us.
I would echo the same thing as Nikki, especially for people with disabilities. We would love to have their participation. Developmental Disabilities Day is February 22nd. So people with developmental disabilities can come and talk to legislators and make their issues heard. So that's an exciting day. The ARC hosts that program or that day. So if you would like to get involved, I'll be around and I can help you get connected. And the ARC is throughout Maryland as well. So.
And my last thing is we will, once all of the protocols from each committee are released, because we're still waiting on those, we will likely be hosting a very short virtual training just on helping you navigate those protocols and so forth, right? So we'll have that date set soon once we know what all the rules are. So thank you, everyone. And I'll pass it back. Thank you, Molly. I think you should be able to jump off.
Thank you.
Bye, Molly. I think your mic's on. Oh, I don't know. I think it's working. It's not on.
We're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back at 2:40.
No, Kelly, Sammy, we're going to take a very quick group picture right here. It's not working.
The mic. Oh, there we go.
Oh.
We're going to take a short break and be back at 2:40 for panel number 2, transparency and police accountability. There's coffee and water in the back, and then if anyone has to use the restroom, it is to the right past the elevator. And we will see you at 2:40.
Casey, can you take a group picture for us really quickly? Be made available at the end of the day for our mixer, but water, coffee, Wi-Fi is available if you're in the room and you need to do work.